It was the arrogance of announcing a replacement before ending what already existed. When a person starts rewriting the truth online, instead of speaking in your kitchen, your boundary cannot stay soft. My name is Isaiah Bell, and the first time I saw my wife call another man her real partner, I was standing in line at a carryout on a damp Thursday evening in West Baltimore, waiting on a lake trout platter I had ordered every other week for 12 years. The man behind the counter was banging a metal spatula against the grill. Somebody near the soda fridge was arguing about the Ravens. It was ordinary noise, ordinary grease, ordinary life. Then my phone lit up, and there was my wife, Nia, smiling into a camera at a rooftop charity mixer, her hand spread across another man's chest like she'd been doing for years. The caption sat on the photo like a lit match dropped on dry carpet. My real partner. There was a red heart. There was a champagne glass. There was the kind of confidence people only have when they think no consequence can reach them. I read it 3 times because my brain kept rejecting the sentence. Nia and I had been married 16 years. We lived in a brick row house in Hamilton Hills with a narrow front porch, crooked flower boxes, and a wind chime my aunt said sounded like church bells on bad days. I stared at that post until the cashier called my number twice. If you already feel where this is going, take 1 second and like this video. And if you know somebody who has ever been blindsided by betrayal, share this story with them. Subscribe for more raw relationship drama stories where the truth always comes out. I did not throw the phone. I did not call her on the spot. I did not march across the city looking for a scene. I paid for my food, drove home through a soft evening rain, and set the white paper bag on our kitchen counter next to a ceramic cookie jar shaped like a bluebird. That kitchen had seen nearly all of me. Flu fevers, payday laughter, tight months, burnt biscuits, quiet apologies. I stood there with the carryout going cold and felt something much worse than rage settle into me. It was clear, slow, cold clarity, the kind that makes your breathing sound too loud. Nia worked as Community Partnerships Director for a private health foundation tied to a large hospital system. She was good at being admired. She could walk into a room full of city council people, donors, neighborhood activists, and skeptical pastors, and by dessert she had everyone nodding along. She knew what scarf to wear, when to laugh, how to touch somebody's elbow just enough to feel warm but not familiar. I used to be proud of that. Later, I learned that the same skill set that wins grants can also hide betrayal. The man in the photo was Devin Price, her younger events manager, 32, neat beard, expensive smile. I knew Devin. I had shaken his hand twice at foundation dinners, where I wore a suit that always felt too tight in the shoulders. He called me sir even after I told him not to, which used to amuse Nia. He had a way of listening with his head tilted, like every sentence spoken near him was worth preserving. The first time he came to our house for a planning meeting, he complimented our stained glass lamp in the front room. Nia had looked too pleased by that. I remembered it now, because betrayal makes old moments rise up from the floorboards with a different face. I am 45, a public school counselor at a high school on the east side. I believe in forms filed on time, in showing up early, in making coffee before talking when something hurts. My father drove a city bus for 30 years and told me a man should never let his emotions steer with both hands. My mother disagreed with him on nearly everything except that one sentence. So that night, I made coffee at 9:30, though coffee that late is a terrible idea, and sat at the kitchen table under the yellow light while rain ticked the back windows. I opened the post again and took screenshots. Then I looked at the comments. That part hurt worse than the caption. Co-workers from the foundation were laughing under it. A donor's wife wrote, "You two are magic." A local food writer who had once eaten sweet potato pie at my table left fire emojis. Nia's sorority sister Dana wrote, "About time y'all stop hiding." About time. That phrase pressed on my chest. Hiding meant this was old. Hiding meant I was the last one invited to the funeral of my own marriage. I clicked through the Foundation's page and saw the rooftop event was listed as an official fundraising mixer, sponsored and photographed. I made my first decision right there. I could have called Nia and demanded an explanation before she even got home. Instead, I chose silence for one night because I needed truth more than I needed drama. I needed to know whether that post was reckless flirting, a months-long affair, or some ugly joke that would still end us anyway. I also knew Nia. If confronted too early, she would gather herself, rearrange facts, cry in control way, and make me argue against a version she had already polished. I wanted the unvarnished thing. So I waited, took more screenshots, and said nothing. She came in at 11:18 p.m. smelling like rainwater, perfume, and rooftop smoke from one of those decorative patio heaters. She dropped her heels by the bench, saw me at the table, and smiled like the world had not shifted. "You are still awake?" she asked. She always sounded a little musical after donor events, like applause lingered in her throat. I said I could not sleep. She kissed my forehead, not my mouth, and moved around the kitchen with the ease of somebody who believed the room belonged to her. She poured herself sparkling water and never once mentioned the post. "How was the mixer?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the mug in my hands. "Long," she said. "Good money, though. The pediatric wing campaign is finally moving." Then she reached for my carry-out leftovers, wrinkled her nose, and asked why I had eaten so late. I watched her from the corner of my eye, waiting for even a flicker of guilt, the tiny human stutter that appears when a lie brushes past the truth. Nothing. She was composed, careful, ordinary. I almost hated her more for that than I would have for panic. Calm dishonesty has a very particular cruelty to it. We had no children. That had once been a grief and then a truce. The first years we tried and failed and sat in sterile offices with soft-spoken doctors who said words like viability and probability. After that, Nia threw herself into work, and I threw myself into everybody else's children at school. We built rituals to cover the hollow. Friday fish from the carryout. Sunday morning walks around Lake Montebello when the weather behaved. A Christmas puzzle spread across the dining table with old jazz records playing. It is strange what can survive sorrow and still die from vanity. I learned that sentence in slow motion. The next morning was Friday. Nia left before 7 in a camel coat with the sharp shoulders she wore when she wanted to look expensive. She stood in the doorway tightening one earring and said, "Do not forget we are at your mother's on Sunday." I said I had not forgotten. She smiled, checked herself in the hall mirror, and left. After the door closed, I opened my laptop and started where I should have started months earlier. Our marriage had not exploded in one photo. It had been leaking for a while. I needed to see how long I had been mopping up blind. We shared a family iPad mostly used for recipes, church live streams when my mother's knee acted up, and the occasional crossword. Nia was careless in the way confident people often are. Her work messages were connected. Her email refreshed automatically. I found event itineraries, hotel confirmations, dinner reservations for 2 in cities where she had supposedly been working too late to eat, and one receipt from a jazz lounge in Philadelphia on a weekend she had told me she was staying with her cousin in Silver Spring. The account name on a ride receipt was Devon's. My ears went hot. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. I kept going. A message thread with Dana did more damage than any hotel bill. He still has no idea. Dana had written 6 weeks earlier. Nia replied, "Isaiah notices patterns, not feelings. He will notice when I am ready for him to." I had to close the iPad then, because that sentence found the softest part of me. Patterns, not feelings. I sat back in a chair and stared at the dining room wall, where our wedding photo hung in a black frame. In that photo, Nia's head is tilted toward me like trust itself. I almost took it down right then. I didn't. Instead, I called my cousin Roland, who owns a small accounting office near Charles Village and has the kind of mind that hears numbers as warnings. Roland and I are not dramatic men. Our most emotional conversations usually happen while changing a tire or cleaning a grill. When he answered, I asked if he had time to look over some financial records without asking too many questions. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Come by after lunch. Bring everything. And do not make a move before you understand what money is where." That became my second decision. I would not fight blind. I would count first. Roland's office smelled like toner, old carpet, and the peppermint candies he kept in a crystal bowl that belonged to his mother. We spent 3 hours tracing our accounts. Nia had a separate travel card I knew about, but there was also a reimbursement pattern that looked crooked, Foundation meals that somehow match weekends away. Car service charges attached to official events with no corresponding donor meetings. Repeated hotel extensions. This is not my field, Roland said, tapping the papers with a pencil. But her employer cares about ethics. This had become more than personal. I nodded. The personnel had already wrecked enough. Practical was what I had left. On Sunday, we went to my mother's house in Park Heights for dinner as planned. The whole family was there because my mother uses food the way some people use intervention. My sister Janine brought collard greens. My nephew spilled orange soda near the hallway radiator. My mother made smothered turkey wings because red meat had started bothering everybody's doctor. Nia moved through that house with her usual grace, complimenting the cornbread, fixing my aunt's necklace clasp, laughing on cue. Watching her perform in front of people who had loved her for years made my stomach turn. I considered telling my mother everything that afternoon. I did not. That was my third decision, and it could have gone differently. My mother is a retired nurse with a voice that can press shame into concrete. If I had told her, she would have called Nia into the den, shut the pocket door, and brought the truth out by force. A part of me wanted that. I wanted witnesses. I wanted Nia exposed under family light. But my mother's house had held funerals, baby showers, and New Year prayers. I would not drag my marriage onto her table beside the peach cobbler. So I kept quiet and watched Nia help wash dishes with my sister like nothing was broken. 2 nights later, I got the confession I did not ask for. Not the full confession, because people like Nia rarely walk in fully undressed by truth, but enough. I was in the basement, restringing the old Stella guitar I had not played in months. That guitar belonged to my uncle, and the case still smelled like cedar and old sermon books. Nia came downstairs in one of my college sweatshirts and stood at the bottom step with her arms folded. "You have been strange," she said. I almost laughed. "Strange. Have I?" I asked. "Yes," she said, distant, judgmental, quiet in a pointed way. Then she said something that gave away more than she intended. "You cannot act wounded every time my life gets bigger than yours." I set the guitar down carefully because I understood then that her betrayal was not just appetite, it was contempt. I asked what that meant. She sighed, already annoyed that she had to explain herself to someone she had demoted in her heart. "It means I need partnership, Isaiah. Real partnership. Someone who understands pressure, visibility, and what my work costs me." The room was still around us. I asked if she was talking about Devin. She blinked once, then sat on the laundry table like a woman tired of pretending. "Do not say his name like this is some trashy scandal," she said. "He respects me." I remember those words exactly because of how cleanly they broke something final. Not I made a mistake. Now I am sorry. He respects me. As if I had not spent 16 years respecting the woman she was while being quietly abandoned by the woman she was becoming. I asked whether the post was meant for me or for everybody else. She looked away and said, "I was tired of shrinking the truth." That line would have sounded brave if it had not been standing on my neck. I asked one last question, because sometimes your heart wants to hurt itself completely, to remove all arguments. "How long?" She rubbed her thumb against the hem of the sweatshirt. "Since late spring," she said. "It was November. That meant cookouts, my birthday, my mother's surgery, our anniversary trip that she shortened for a board emergency. All of it covered in a second life." I nodded and said, "Thank you for finally saying one honest sentence." She stiffened at that. "I did not come down here to be insulted." "No," I said, "you came down here because you thought I would fight for the spot he already occupies." She slept in the guest room that night. The radiator in there hissed and clicked like it was gossiping. I lay awake listening to the city settle outside, a siren far off, somebody dragging a trash bin, the midnight bus grumbling down Harford Road. Around 2, I opened her public post again. It was still up. That was the part one kept returning to. Not only had she betrayed me, she had published a replacement while still sleeping under my roof, using my steadiness like a utility she no longer respected, but still relied on. In the morning, I called a lawyer recommended by Roland's church deacon. Her name was Celeste Harmon. and she practiced family law at a narrow office near the courthouse with framed degrees, a firm that looked healthier than most people I know, and a directness that made me sit straighter. She read my notes, reviewed the screenshots, and asked precise questions without once treating me like a fool for staying this long. When I finished, she clasped her hands and said, "You have two matters, not one, a marriage ending and a financial exposure issue. We handle both carefully." Then she told me to stop speaking to Nia about specifics. Copy everything legally accessible and document every shared asset. I followed instructions because instructions were a rope. Over the next 10 days, I moved through my life like a man carrying glass. At school, I helped a senior finish his community college essay, while my own marriage was burning quietly in my coat pocket. I sat through an attendance meeting and nodded at the principal as if my wife had not replaced me in public. At home, Nia floated in and out with growing irritation. She wanted to fight with volume. She wanted me to become unreasonable so her choices could feel reactive instead of deliberate. I gave her facts, silence, and a legal calendar. It enraged her. Meanwhile, consequences began where she least expected them. The Health Foundation had strict disclosure rules about supervisor-subordinate relationships, especially when grant travel and donor funds were involved. I did not send anything at first. I wrestled with that. Part of me wanted to walk away and let her career stand untouched, because no matter what she had done, I had once prayed over that career with her at our kitchen table. But then I found reimbursement approval signed by Nia for events Devin attended alone, and a boutique hotel charge listed under community outreach. My marriage was one betrayal. Misusing charitable money was another. I submitted the documentation. I did it to the Foundation's ethics portal on a gray Monday morning before sunrise, with a cup of diner coffee going lukewarm beside my laptop. The diner was across from the school bus depot, and the waitress called everybody baby regardless of age or mood. I sat in a cracked vinyl booth under a buzzing light and uploaded screenshots, receipts, and short statement. I did not mention heartbreak. I mentioned policy, travel, and reporting lines. I remember my hand hovering over the final button. Once I sent it, her humiliation would no longer be private. I press submit anyway because some silence becomes complicated if it lasts. Nia found out about the complaint before she knew it came from me. I could tell by the way she stormed to the front door 3 days later, dropped her tote on the hall runner, and called Devin before she even took off her coat. I was in the den pretending to read. "They are doing interviews," she hissed into the phone. "No, do not text me that. Stop panicking." Her voice had a crack in it I had never heard before. It was the sound of somebody discovering that charm does not work on compliance departments. She passed the doorway and saw me. The call ended instantly. "Did you know about this?" she asked. I set my book down. "About what?" I asked. "Do not do that." She looked flushed and suddenly older, the way stress drags a face downward. Somebody filed a complaint. They're asking about travel, reimbursements, and my relationship with Devin. I held her eyes. "Is there a relationship with Devin?" She hated being led back to her own words. "That is not the point." "It seems exactly like the point," I said. Then I told her Celeste had drafted divorce papers and that she would be served formally by the end of the week. Her mouth actually fell open. "Divorce?" she repeated, like I had proposed a weather change. "Isaiah, stop. You are angry, embarrassed, whatever, but this is not who we are." I stood then, because sitting made me feel pinned. "This is exactly who we are now," I said. "You made that clear online." She started crying, but even in that moment I could see her measuring the usefulness of tears. "I was reckless," she said. "I was hurt. I was confused." I asked whether confusion explained the hotel bills, whether hurt explained the comments from friends who had known before I did. She had no answer that could survive daylight. She was served at work on Friday afternoon. I know, because she called me from a parking garage, voice shaking with fury. "You had me served in front of people?" she asked. "I did not arrange the lobby." I said, "I arranged the papers." She said I was humiliating her on purpose. That word again. Humiliating. As if humiliation had entered the marriage only when it touched her skin. We hung up with nothing resolved except timing. She came home late that night and slept on the sofa downstairs, wrapped in the throw blanket my mother had crocheted for our 10th anniversary. I did not cover her. The foundation investigation stretched into December. Nothing was instant. That is what people get wrong about consequences. Most of the time they arrive in dress shoes with clipboards, not thunder. Neil was placed on leave first. Then Devin was suspended. Then there were follow-up interviews, requests for passwords, audit reviews, donor inquiries. At home, the air changed. She moved carefully, as if the house itself had become temporary. Her anger kept collapsing into fear. One evening I came downstairs and found her sitting at the kitchen table turning my grandmother's bronze turtle paperweight over and over in her hand, like it might tell her the future. "I need you not destroy me," she said without looking up. That sentence angered me more than any insult. "Now I am sorry. Now that I hurt you, I need you not to destroy me." She still believed I was the center of the collapse because that was easier than admitting she had placed dynamite in every room herself. I told her the truth. "I am not doing this to you. I am stepping out of the way." She finally looked at me then, and for one fragile second I saw the old Nia, the woman who used to dance barefoot while frying catfish on New Year's Eve. Then it was gone. 2 days before Christmas. The foundation terminated her for cause. The letter cited policy violations, failure to disclose, and misuse of organizational funds. Devin was terminated too. His apartment had been tied to the foundation's housing assistance program during a neighborhood wellness initiative, which made the optics even worse. Local professional circles are smaller than people think. The news moved quietly but fast through nonprofit boards, hospital staff, event planners, and church committees. Nobody posted it publicly, but everybody knew. A woman who had introduced Nia at a panel in October suddenly stopped returning her calls. That was when the humiliation became real to her. Divorce is paperwork until furniture changes hands. Then it becomes physical. After the termination, Celeste accelerated negotiations. The house was mine before the marriage, refinanced later, but still protected. Our retirement accounts were divided, but not evenly, because the documentation around spending, reimbursements, and concealed debt made her position weaker. Nia had spent years curating a beautiful life of expensive textures she insisted we had earned. Custom drapes, imported rugs, candles that smelled like cedar libraries. Piece by piece, practicality replaced image. She moved into a short-term rental near Towson with bland walls and noisy upstairs neighbors. She left with box shoes and a folded pride. I would like to say I felt triumphant. I did not. I felt tired in the marrow. There were moments of satisfaction. Yes, the day Celeste told me the judge would not entertain alimony. In the afternoon, I took my wedding band off and set it in the little dish by the sink without my hand reaching for it again. But mostly I felt grief with sharp edges. You can know you are right and still mourn what had to be cut away. That winter, I started taking a long bus route home some days, just to sit among strangers and listen to the city breathe without asking anything from me. Nia tried 3 times to reverse the story between us. The first time, she blamed stress. The second time, she blamed my emotional reserve. The third time, months later, she came to the house wearing a plain black coat and no makeup and finally blamed herself. By then it was February. Snowmelt ran along the gutters, and the front steps were slick. She stood under the porch light and said, "I did not understand what I was throwing away because I thought you would always be there to absorb it." That was the most honest thing she said from start to finish, and it came far too late. I let her stand in the doorway, but not inside. She looked around the front room like memory was furniture. I had changed small things, moved the lamp, taken down 2 wedding photos, put my guitar on a stand by the window instead of inside the case. She noticed everything. "Devin is gone," she said. "I do not care," I replied, and I meant it. He had become irrelevant. Betrayal always looks like a triangle from far away, but at close range it is usually a mirror. "I lost my job," she said. "I know. People are talking. They were talking before." I said. She cried then, not delicately, not strategically. Real crying is messy and disappointing in itself. "I thought he saw me," she said. "I thought you had stopped." That sentence deserved 100 ugly responses, but what came out of me was quieter. "I saw you. I just stopped auditioning for your approval." She put her hand over her mouth like the words had struck bone. We stood there listening to water drip from the awning. In another life, I might have reached for her. In this one, I did not. She asked whether there was any version of us left to save. I told her no. That answer cost me more than she knew. Refusal is not easy when history has your scent on it. We had built 16 years of mornings, shared bills, private jokes, and grief rituals around doctors' waiting rooms. There's been love here. Real love, not enough to survive contempt, but real enough that any felt like burying somebody who had once protected me. Still, I said no because I had learned something brutal. You cannot heal inside the house where your dignity was rented out. She left with wet eyes and a straight back, and I closed the door softly because even endings deserve manners. The divorce finalized in early March. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown, just signed orders, adjusted figures, and the strange flatness that follows legal finality. I left the courthouse and walked 3 blocks to a barbershop I had been visiting since college. Mr. Leonard, who had known me with an afro, a fade, and one terrible attempt at waves, looked at my face in the mirror and said, "You want the honest cut today?" I said, "Yes." He nodded once and got to work. There is something cleansing about being still while another black man quietly helps you look like yourself again. If you made it this far, you already know this was never just about cheating. It was about disrespect, consequences, and choosing your dignity. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves unforgettable relationship drama. And subscribe for more original stories where secrets, betrayal, and karma collide. That spring, I rebuilt my life in humble ways. I started playing my uncle's guitar on Sundays after church instead of falling asleep in front of television noise. I replanted the flower boxes with marigolds because they survive neglect better than petunias. I took my mother to Lexington Market and bought her lemon sticks the way my father used to. I let Janine set me up on exactly 0 dates because I was not interested in becoming a project. The house sounded different without Nia. At first, a quiet scraped. Then it opened. There's a kind of peace that only arrives after you stop begging confusion to explain itself. I heard updates about Nia, because cities carry stories whether you ask them to or not. She interviewed for 2 positions, and lost both when references went cold. She started consulting independently, then took contract work for a smaller community arts group across the county line where fewer people knew her. A mutual friend told Janine that Nia had become more private. I almost smiled at that. Privacy had finally become necessary once performance stopped paying. I did not wish ruin on her. I wished comprehension on her, which is harder and usually lonelier. Public humiliation fades. The private knowledge of what you chose lasts longer. One evening in late April, I found the bronze turtle paperweight in the back of a kitchen drawer while looking for batteries. I turned it over my hand and remember her anxious fingers circling its shell the week everything started falling apart. I sat in my home office beside a notebook where I had begun writing down things I ignored in the marriage. Dismissive jokes, rehearsed apologies, the way I abandoned music because it annoyed her during work calls. Not to stay bitter, to stay accurate. Memory tries to beautify what wounded it. Writing helps keep the edges in their true places. So when people ask how my wife flaunted her real partner online and ended up jobless, divorced, and humiliated, I tell them the online post was only the match, not the pile of dry wood. The real ending started earlier, when she decided admiration mattered more than honesty, and I decided peace was worth more than performance. The humiliation was not in losing me publicly. It was in discovering that the image she trusted could not save her from the facts. As for me, I am still in Baltimore, still counseling teenagers, still making Friday fish some weeks, still learning that dignity can return one ordinary day at a time. What stayed with me most was not the post itself. It was a pattern around it. The caption, the hidden receipts, the way she kept calling consequence humiliation only when it landed on her. That is the lesson here. Boundaries are not revenge, and silence is not weakness when you're using it to see clearly. By the time I said no at the porch and found that bronze turtle in the drawer, I understood something simple. Grief can share a room with self-respect, but self-respect has to be invited in on purpose. The end.